In this video, I want to continue the walkthrough through the Precept 1 problems. So let's look at problem 3a. So this asks us to look at a data set like Gapminder and to then figure out how many countries there are in the data set on a given continent. And again, we are asked to do that in a function, but we'll start by actually just writing the code outside the function. So let me load Gapminder. And let me now actually try and figure out how to count the countries. So the easiest thing is to just say, well, Gapminder, and then just take the rows where the continent corresponds to the continent that we're interested in. So in this instance, it would be Asia. So what happens, for example, right? Or like, let's take like a continent that doesn't have as many countries, so just 2. So I need to load dplyr as well. So you'll notice that here this was black, so it gets blue if it's a keyword. So if you see that the text is black, there might be a typo. Okay, let's see what happens. So what happens here is I get data for just countries in Oceania. So that looks like this. I can store it temporarily in A, for example, so that it's easier to view. So I'll do view of A, and this is what I get. So just Australia and New Zealand. So, okay, how do I now actually count how many countries there are here? Because there are still 24 rows, but just 2 countries. Well, that is what ndistinct is for. So what I would do first is I would say, okay, I just want the column that corresponds to the countries. So I'll say select country, like so. And now if I view A, what I get is just Australia and New Zealand. After I got that, I can just do ndistinct, like that. And at this point, A is 2. So that is one way to do things. So I just say, first of all, I'll just discard all the data that's completely irrelevant to me. And I'll do that by saying continent is equal to the particular name of the continent. And then I'll say, okay, like I want to use ndistinct. So ndistinct, remember, that's what counts the total number of distinct rows. So I couldn't have done that here, because here there are lots of distinct rows. In fact, every row is distinct because, you know, this row is not exactly the same as this row. So for example, the year is different, and the life expectancy is different, the population is different. In fact, everything is different. So what I'm thinking is, okay, but if I just had the country, then ndistinct would work, because there are just 2 distinct entries if I ignore everything in this table that's not the column country. So for that reason, I say select country, and what that does just gives me the countries. So here just see Australia, but New Zealand is down there. And then I get to say ndistinct. And now I get to. So that's the pure dplyr solution. Now you might imagine other solutions, and maybe you like them better. So we saw the function unique, which works on vectors rather than data frames before, right? So the way unique works is you would say unique, and then here if you have repeats, then you just get 1 copy of each, right? And of course, like if this is -4, this is completely fine. You just get like a -4. This doesn't have to be in order. So how can we use that? Well, in order to use that, what we need to do is we need to first extract a vector from the data frame. So to extract a vector, we can a column as a vector. What we can do is we can use the $sign operator, right? So we can say, for example, Gapminder $country, and that gets us a vector that contains all the country in the entire column, in the entire data frame. Now here what we would do is we would first filter everything out that's not relevant to us. So we do something like this. At this point we'll say, okay, so this is the intermediate result. I'll call it res nevertheless. Now from here I can extract the vector, so I'd say res $country, and that would be the vector of the countries. So as you see, just 2 countries here. Now I can say unique of that. So unique of that, that's going to be just Australia and New Zealand. And finally, to find the length of a vector, I would say length of unique, and I'll get 2. So I get 2 either way. So what was the idea here again? So I used dplyr in order to filter the rows, and this is probably the best way to filter the rows. But then it said, okay, like first I'll extract the column that contains the country names. Whenever I extract a column using the $operator, I get a vector. If I get a vector, I can use unique in order to just get 1 copy of each. So I get 1 copy of Australia, 1 copy of New Zealand. In order to find the length of a vector, I do length of. So this is the vector that contains the 2 countries, and this is the length. Now, this is the kind of thing that if you're just beginning to program, might seem kind of somewhat complicated to you. But this is an extremely common trick. So the trick of first extracting the column that's relevant and then using distinct or something like that, or sum or whatever. So this is the kind of thing that's worth just kind of thinking through and filing away as, oh, sometimes I just need to extract the 1 column and throw away lots of the other information. In the same way that sometimes you need to throw out a lot of the rows, and what you do is you use filter. So okay, so let's go with this piece of code and let's see how to actually turn it into a function. So again, start by saying, okay, so what's the name of the function? Well, like maybe count countries or something. That's going to be a function. So what's the information that we need? Well, the information that we need is the data frame. So here we called it gapminder. So here let me call it gap or something. And I also need to know which continent I'm interested in. So I'll name this cont. So here there is like a little bit of a subtlety. So I cannot name this thing continent, because then there's going to be an issue when in filter I say continent equals continent, because that just makes no sense, or makes too much sense, as the case may be. So now what I'll do is I'll just copy this and I'll keep track of, okay, so I'm sending gap, so this is the data frame, so this is the data frame that I got to use inside the function. So rather than say gapminder, I got to say gap. Now I say continent, so this was just an example. So here instead I'll say cont, like so. So now we're saying, okay, so whatever is the continent, get just the subset. So we can try it right now because we've changed the code enough that it's maybe worth trying. So I'll say this, and now I'll try this part and see what happens. So that did not work. The reason it did not work is because I did not define gap yet. So let me do that as well. So this is, to be clear, just kind of scratch work. This is not going to be in the final answer. So I've defined gap as well, and now I can try it again. And now it's fine. So now I can select country. So select the column country. And now I apply and distinct to this, and I'll get 2. So that's my answer. So I'll say return, like so, and I'm done. So how do I test this? I would say count countries, and now I'll say gapminder, and I can say whatever I want. So I can say Europe. So because I already kind of tested it, so I know that it works, at least for this case. So let me try to run this. So the answer is 30 countries in Europe for this data set. So again, gapminder gets sent to gap, Europe gets sent to this, and then we're saying, okay, so this is Europe, and we're counting how many in Europe. So let's try it where we know the answer, and it's important to try your functions with small data frames where you definitely know the answer. And that did not work because I misspelled Oceania. So let's try again. And now the answer is 2, so that worked out. Next, so we need to write a function that takes a data frame like gapminder and returns the country with the largest life expectancy on a given continent between the years Y1 and Y2. So this is kind of similar to what we've done before in the sense that we need to discard a lot of the information. So let's go back to this. So this, to be clear, is scratch code. This is scratch work. This is not something that you would submit. So all of that should go. And in fact, like, let's let it go. But let me take this because this is going to be useful. So I'm saying, okay, so gapminder, filter. So how do we need to filter it? So we need to say there are, so this is, it returns the country, largest life expectancy on a given continent. So we're still going to say continent is this, right? And then we're going to say between the years Y1 and Y2. So in addition to the condition continent equals Oceania, for example, we'd say year is greater or equal than Y1. So here I'll define Y1 in a second. And also year is smaller or equal than Y2. And here I'll say, for example, Y1 is going to be like 1970, and Y2, let's say, is 1990. So here I have multiple conditions using which I filter. So what does it mean? It means that the only rows that get left in are rows with continent equals Oceania, and year is greater than Y1 or equal, and year is also smaller than Y2. So that would make the year be between Y1 and Y2. So let's try it and see that it works. So I need to define the years first. Okay, so seems okay, although you might like to actually check this and make sure that we're not missing anything, but we're not. So we don't need to select the country or anything like that because we need something different. So what we need is we need the country with the largest life expectancy. So let's see what the answer here is. So those are all the life expectancies. So in Australia, it was 76.3 in 1987, and that seems like the largest number. So there are multiple approaches here. So one approach would be to just arrange by life expectancy, right? So to arrange by life expectancy, you would say arrange life exp. So let's try what happens. Let's try this and see what happens. So as you see, the data frame is now sorted by life expectancy. So the last row has the largest life expectancy. Now, extracting the large row is not kind of that much harder than extracting the top row, but let's say that we want to instead arrange in descending order so that the largest life expectancy is in the first row. So we'll say descend like this, so DSC, life expectancy. And now we see that the largest life expectancy is in the first row, and we can of course like look in the first row and see like in which to which country does this life expectancy belong, and the answer is Australia. So great. So what do we need to do? We need to extract the word Australia here, so this specific thing. So how do we do that? Well, first we can extract the row, and then we can say, well, like in this row, what's the country? Or the other way, extract the country and then just get the first element. So let's go with the second approach. So we'll say that A is this whole thing. So this is A. Now A dollar country, that's going to be just Australia, Australia, New Zealand, New Zealand, Australia, New Zealand, Australia, New Zealand. Like that. So it's horizontal as opposed to vertical, but same thing. And now I can say $8 country at 1. And that would be Australia, the first thing. So this Australia. Okay, so we're done. So all that's left to do is the same kind of thing. So I'll say largest lifeexp function. What is the information that we need? Well, we need the gapminder or the gapminder like data set. So that would be gap. And we need year 1 and year 2, like the years in between which the year that we're interested in is in. So that's got to go in. We don't really need anything else because like continent, that's just the name of a column, life expectancy likewise. So that is all that we need. You can also look at the question and see that here's what we're giving it, right? So we're saying it's going to be in this data set that's like gapminder, and it's going to be between y1 and y2. You're not giving any more information to the function. So okay, now we'll do this, and again actually we need the continent as well. So we'll say continent like this. Nothing here needs to change, so except like this was like one big line, so maybe we should like make things a little bit nicer. And now what we need to do is we need to compute this and return it. So I'll say return the country. Now you might consider naming this something other than A. So what is this? So this would be gap sorted LE or something like that, because it's sorted by life expectancy. And then, well, instead of A, this is going to be this. And we're done. So this is going to be the function like that. And we'll say largest lifeexp, and here we'll say gapminder, and we can just like make things up. So 1970, 1990, Oceania, like this, and we got the answer Australia, which is the answer that we wanted. So you'll note that here we got those levels. So if you remember, this is because Australia is a factor. So if we want to be nice and just return a character, we'll say as character like this. And now we get Australia as the answer. Okay, question 3c is to write a function that computes the world population in a given year. So how do we do that? So first of all, we need to figure out like what is the question asking here. So let's view gapminder, and let's see. So we have this column population, and what we want to do is we want to basically like sum up the populations of all the countries in a particular year. So how do you approach this? Well, I would say, first of all, throw out all the irrelevant information, meaning all the data from the years that we're not interested in. So we'll just do that. So I'll say gapminder, and I'll say filter year equals y. And here I'll say that the year is, for example, 1982. So what I get is, well, this is not defined. So what I get is just data from 1982. So at this point, what I need to do is I need to just sum up the entire population. So let's try to do that. So I'll say summarize. And now, so I'm creating a new data frame. That data frame is going to contain the sum of all the populations. So I'll say total population equals to sum of population. One thing to notice here is that I do not say gapminder dollar population, I just say population. In this case, it does not matter. I could go either way. But in general, inside summarize, you're already processing the data frame. So it's actually dangerous to say gapminder dollar population, because you might be confused about which data frame exactly you're processing, and then things will go bad. In addition, if you were to say use group by, that would create problems, because if you go gapminder dollar population, the group by in here that you potentially would have inserted would not be respected. And again, you would not know what the problem is. So let's try to run this, and we'll get a small error. So here it actually just says how to solve it. So the problem here is that the population is recorded as an integer, and there is an upper limit which is below 6 billion for what the sum of integers could be, because it also has to be an integer. But here we just convert it to numeric and it's going to be fine. So we're just following the advice here. Okay. And now we see that the answer is, about 4 billion in 1982. So the last thing that we need to do is to convert this thing into a function. Completely straightforward. So we just say world population or something. Say function, and we'll say y. And we'll return this whole thing, and we'd be done. So we ask for the world population. So here we got to be a little bit careful, because if we kind of ask for a year that's not in the data set, we'll just get 0. But let's try 2002, that's in there. And here we get about 6 billion.